Hello, my monstrosities. Hello once again. Today I bring to you a bit of a spicier video. I'll be a little bit more passionate in this one, I can already tell. I'm going to take this opportunity to make a video regarding Tyranids as like the base and example, because that's my faction, right? To discuss a couple of common points that I see get thrown at me in comments, right? But before I do that, I do want to say two things actually. One, special shout out to Elite Dark Assassin. I really appreciate your comments because it's those type of comments where I can understand where some disconnect from what I'm saying sometimes gets lost on new or different audience members. So I appreciate the framing of how you engage with me, even if it seems like it might be a disagreement or an agreement, but in a different take. So, really appreciate that front. And on the second part, usually uh, I would give shout outs to any other channels that I might mention, like some of their ideas and everything. I'm not going to do that on this one, unfortunately, because I don't want to drag anybody down with me. Uh, if it's going to be a take that I know other people share. I'm just going to say it. Say that other people have said it. If you find it, you find it. If you don't, you don't. But I'd rather everybody have the heat in my comment section than being mad at somebody else because I talked about a similar talking point because people didn't understand the way that I said it or meant it sometimes. So, to that point, what are we going to be talking about today? First off, one of the common things that I see is you can't just talk about data sheets. There's more to data sheets, and it's like, yeah, I see that we stopped listening about what I said about the data sheets. But to that point, one of my favorite examples of how that happened is Von Rhinesleepers. If you've been here, you know I really like the Von Rhinesleepers, and this is the thing where I'm going to talk about sometimes the absurdity and how emotions of people's attachment to models, which, that sounds absurd, but I promise I'll highlight it here, kind of outweighs the things that I then discuss because I don't really have too many attachments to certain models or units, right? Now, I know you say, but you just said you love Von Ryan's Leapers. Yeah, I still also can realize when they're weak. But to that point, you have Von Ryan's Leapers. They have 10-inch move, T5, 4 up save, 6 up invuln, 3 wounds. Fights first, infiltrate, and stealth. Heroic intervention for free. They cost 70 points for 3 models. Now, between stealth and fights first and an invulnerable save, and a 10-inch movement, can the class please tell me how mathematically in any scenario melee warriors are tougher than them? With no invuln, no stealth, no fights first, uh, and a movement of 6, right? The same T5, 4 up save, 3 wounds. That's fucking impossible. That's mathematically impossible. But yet, that's something that I get a lot. Alright, let's go to the other thing that you have to take into account because, other things play out. What about their footprint? Maybe Von Rhinesleeper's footprint is too big so that you leave the possibility of being shot from more angles. You're also going with something like a brick of 6 models to 6 models. What's their base? 40 millimeters to 50 millimeters. And then let's take into account overhanging, right? Now, VRL's got some overhanging, so do the melee warriors. So you tell me, class, how is that even remotely possible that melee warriors are more durable than this unit over here, besides just you wanting it to be? It is impossible. If you get charged first, before you can charge, and I'll talk about that in a second too, you have fights first. If you get shot, you have stealth. And no matter what, you have a save. You get hit with AP3, guess what? Your melee warriors go poof. And now, again, if you've been here, you understand I don't rate melee warriors very highly. And as we've seen in the meta develop, exactly why that is and what I was saying. And even when I made my Von Ryan's Leapers video, a lot of you in the comment section caught on to another unit that has been on the rise that fulfills much the same purpose. Raveners. Now, their save without Armored Thorax is weaker. Has better movement, doesn't have reroll ones, but does still have Twin Linked. Does not have innate synapse by the data sheet, but does have Deep Strike. And so these trade-offs equal that you don't have to start on the board to kind of work your way to an angle to get into melee. Alone, you could Deep Strike 9 inches and maybe get lucky. And again, we'll talk about charges in a bit. So you have the fact that Raveners and also a death from below at the end of your opponent's turn. If this unit is not within engagement range of one or more enemy units, you can remove it from the battlefield and place it into strategic reserves. Alright, that means between that or just starting the game off with them in Deep Strike, if you're not on the board, you can't get shot. And you have this unit over here that has Fights First, Stealth, and an Invuln. 3 defensive categories. And then compare it to Warriors that have absolutely nothing. Tell me how the Warriors are supposed to be any bulkier than the other two, besides you just want it to be. Now, there are some times where you have access to detachments and stratagems, and tacking on characters, such as the Winged Tyranid Prime, that can then put enhancements that might make you a little bit tankier. And to those regards, that is the case. However, if we're talking point for point, what can do what, how is that the situation? Now, one of the other points that I was making about Warriors, if you remember that tirade of videos, is the fact that, well, if you compare the units that, again, this is the other thing where I understand where I lose people. Of, you have to listen to the whole spiel, really. A brick of Tyranid warriors goes into an opponent that knows that they have AP2, but damage 1, right? They go up to strength 6 with synapse. Your opponent is more likely to use their defensive stratagem that turn, whether it be minus AP, whether it be minus 1 to hit, on the unit with minus 2 AP, reroll hits, and twin linked, right? Than they are on the unit that has AP1, whether that be Raveners or Von Ryan's Leapers. That's the thing about the game. That, again, you have to hear the whole message. So it's things like that, as an example, where your opponent is going to still play the game and react in certain ways, so you have to force certain movements out of them, certain options, kind of bait them a little bit. Now, if your list doesn't include any warriors, like something I would personally say is the case, where I would advertise for advertise, I would advocate. There we go. Sorry. Um, for more lists to have less warriors, because at the end of the day, we are an army that is good at killing infantry. That's kind of our whole spiel, okay? So I don't usually need a melee only 215 point block to accomplish that goal. You take into account the things like Von Ryan's Leapers, possibly blocking movement, especially with heroic intervention for free, or Ravener scoring points with Deep Strike somewhere else. That's where I then talk about points efficiency. You have units that can accomplish other goals besides just be a melee brick for a task that I can already achieve thanks to the rest of my army. So that's a quick synopsis, and again, I understand the blessing and the curse of talking about things on the internet where not everybody will be caught up to the last season, right? Uh, if I could make 3 highly detailed videos about one thing, as soon as I make that 4th video that talks back to one other thing, you won't have the context because you might not have gone that far, and I can't really fault that. But what I can do is try to highlight moving forward uh, the thing on top of that to see if you come back to see it on the next video and just go from there. Or you just ask me in the comment section politely. So there's the other thing on that one. But going on from that, let's talk about one that was a little bit more recent. Broodlord Gene Stealers. This is one that I again do my typical let's think a bit more about it, right? This one comes off the back of a Broodlord Gene Stealer comment for Vanguard Onslaught, and to which I say Vanguard Onslaught is a good detachment, but there's a reason it always tends to fall off after a month or so of good performance. It always happens time and time again, and quite frankly, just went to Meta Monday, right? And looked at the last three. And let's just see how Vanguard Onslaught is doing. 44%, 10 players, 21 wins, 48 games overall. Vanguard Onslaught, 45%, 12 players, 30 wins, 66 games overall. I should also just highlight those are the columns if you need to see that. And Vanguard Onslaught, 30%, 2 players. Now this one had a weird one where things got changed, so not too confident on this one, but you know, we have going up just so we can see all the info. Sorry, it's scrolling kind of slow. 2 players, 3 wins, 10 games, right? Come on back down. Right. So, how is it that case? Oh, and that the last column I should mention is 8-week win rate that as you just saw on 217 it was 50%, and at this most recent week, I'm sorry, 8-week, 9-week win rate, excuse me, coming back down, it has gone back down again. Where did I just leave you, Tyranids? Right? And now it's about 48%. Because, like I always say, it comes down because it doesn't have innate winning matchups. It is a point scoring detachment, and even to that extent, going back to Broodlord Gene Stealers, this is where I'll do my first non shout out another channel because if you know, you know. Because I don't need them to come down screaming with me, or not come down screaming. If I doubt they will be screaming, but I don't need to drag them down with me, right? I say you can make a list similarly with 30 Gene Stealers, 3 Brood Lords, and achieve similar results to the Vanguard Onslaught list. How do I know that? Because we keep doing it. In fact, if we look at what's going on in Invasion Fleet right now, you look at especially Dag's list. Oh, 2 Brood Lords, 20 Gene Stealers. Look here, and just from the past one, right? Because it's catching on. Even have Death Leaper, a Vanguard Onslaught, opt out now. Not even taking that much. Brood Lord, Gene Stealers. And then the rest, you cycle in some things. Maybe there's some Lictors, maybe Gargoyles, Hormagaunts, right? Also going to look at Dag's list over here because it's the same person, right? Same situation, Lictors. Swap out about 4 pieces, right? Now we go to a Vanguard Onslaught list. Alright, 1 additional unit. Same as here, same as here. Swap out 2 or 3 units. Alright, if the rest of the list is about the damn same and can be in different places, yeah, that's to say that the thing can still achieve its goal for most places, right? Can still do it. So at the end of the day, they're going to scout 8. They are going to scout 8. They're going to go up. If they're jail, they're jail. But here's again back to my point, right? As to where the point I was trying to illustrate in that last video, where I like Vanguard Onslaught. Uh, Again, you can't expect everybody to know your history with detachment or things like that. I can still be critical of things that I like. You all that have been on the channel know that I like Vanguard Onslaught. Probably second best after Crusher Stampede because of all the wacky ideas that you are able to do and interactions you are able to have. But again, that's to say, the detachment itself still has flaws and doesn't do anything besides scoring or trying to help you on that way. So, another thing that frustrates me is, again, I understand if I don't have to try to understand if I don't explain what I mean in the best manner. But if I say, when you look at Vanguard Onslaught, the fact that the Vanguard Invader units that have now the option to advance and charge, a lot of them are utility, and only one of them are good melee unit that can make use of it in combination with its speed and positioning. So, in fact, you won't use this aspect of it a lot if the rebuttal is just because you can advance and charge doesn't mean you have to. I don't understand how that's supposed to be a disagreement with my point when I'm saying, congrats, we have a detachment rule that you might not even exercise because it's either not always optimal and it's also not that transformative, right? We look at Vanguard Onslaught, and unfortunately, advancing and charging does not guarantee that you will make the charge. You can roll a 1 on the advance, and you can still fail the charge. And for melee only units, if you have absolutely nothing to help you with that, as the point that I was trying to illustrate with Vanguard Onslaught, you're kind of SOL. Kind of SOL. Sure, there's no real damage boost here. There's no protection for if you fail your charge. Now, again, in relevance to something like Brewlord Gene Stealers that are probably within 18 inches of your opponent's line of sight somehow, some way, with a large footprint, they will be seen. They probably didn't start off in reserves because you wanted the scout, and as many people will tell you that play Tyranids, they're really telegraphed. Once you have these bricks, you can redeploy them, but there's only so much redeploy you can do where your opponent doesn't go, oh, you're about to scout 8 this way and then hopefully go for an advance and charge on this side. And then let's talk about the other thing in regards to what I mean by Vanguard Onslaught still has its flaws. At the end of the day, what the fuck happens if you go second? What happens if you go second? Did your opponent actually just take it? Probably not. You just sat there and now you are second, waiting for them to hopefully not get an angle on your 11 models that are T4, 5 up save, 2 wound. You know, barring the Brew Stealer having a little bit extra right there. But now you're just hoping that nothing happens to them. And when I say you can take the Brewlord Gene Stealers out of Vanguard Onslaught and they'll be okay, but Vanguard Onslaught does need the Brewlord Gene Stealers. Try a list that does not have Brewlord Gene Stealers in it in Vanguard Onslaught and see how much it works out for you. Because at the end of the day, even if they aren't going to be your damage dealers, they're still bodies. And that's bodies for the detachment to do what they do. But again, I try to repeat this throughout the video, that this is still a good detachment. Still fine. It just does not innately have a winning matchup because you are focused on scoring points. And your opponent, no matter what detachment they are doing, is also going to be trying to score points. If that means that they have to kill you first, well, you don't have too many things in this detachment to help you not do that. If you go against another melee army, what's your protection? If you go against a shooting army, yeah, one of your units can loan up, 18, but beyond that, what happens to the rest of it, right? So, it's to say, it still can have its bad days. It doesn't innately just win, and unfortunately, back to the point where you can still just fail. You can still just fail, right? We all have that day where you roll a 1 on the advance and you roll a 2 on the fucking charge when it should have been a surefire thing. Vanguard Onslaught, unfortunately, doesn't do anything too transformative for our army and for, again, mostly utility units and units that aren't doing too great right now. So compare that to something like Synaptic Nexus, where you're not getting that host of rules, and we will talk about some of those in there. You're not able to regenerate anything else in Assimilation Swarm. This isn't to say that you get a Surge move, that you have access to an Unending Swarm, and Crusher Stampede is trying to make your skew even skewier. And as I've been saying, skew is going to skew, it's going to skew. So even with Unending Swarm and Crusher Stampede, those are two detachments with, here comes the other one, uh, different playstyles that are going to do what they're going to do at points in times. There will be a series of games in which you have opponents that do not have a way to handle 8 T11 monsters. Even if you have a 3-up save on them, they might not have a way to deal with that. Alright? Unending Swarm, there will be times where your opponent has no way to clear 200 gaunts. And that will be your win there. But Vanguard Onslaught doesn't innately give you something besides the fact that now your Brewlord Genestealers, as the premier melee unit, has advance and charge, because your other Vanguard Invaders are utility pieces. But going to that, again, Brewlord Genestealers, where I make the claim that you can take them out of Vanguard Onslaught and still do fine with certain things. As we just saw, Invasion Fleet, guess what happens if you take them in Invasion Fleet? In Invasion Fleet, they get access to Sustained. If, once again, you really need it, if you want to try for it, you can go for some precision. You can give them a type of redeploy similar to Vanguard Onslaught, and I will admit, we'll get to it in a second, Invasion Fleet is a cop-out, right? Invasion Fleet is a cop-out in the fact that it's your index detachment. It's supposed to cover all of your models, units, whatever. That's what the indexes are supposed to do. Now, some people weren't as lucky with their indexes, but, you know, fortunately, our index will cover it, and unfortunately, it still will probably remain amongst the strongest. However, those of you that know, I still rate Assimilation Swarm very highly because of the things that now you have access to in there. But to that point, you have things that happen if you go first or if you go second. You take your Brewlord Genestealers, you're getting shot at, you have a 5-up Feel No Pain. You're getting punched, you have a fight on death. It's your turn, you have bonus consolidation to get them further. Now, the potential threat range of advance and charge adds another 6 inches, right? Because you can make the advance if you roll a good advance and go from there. But your opponent also will be playing the game and not necessarily make it easy for you to get that, even if that's the case, because they can see, oh, you're about to try to send 30 Genestealers at me. So you need a backup plan. And it's nice to say that Invasion Fleet, as we're seeing people take it, you can, once again, as I'm saying, take that many Brewlord Genestealers and get similar results because now they have access to other things. You spend 2 CP, 1 CP with a Hive Tyrant, and now 2 of your units are critting on 5, possibly sustained, to make up for the fact that a lot of the game doesn't take place on objectives. For especially if you're going for the jail style of 30 Brewlord Genestealers. 30 Genestealers, bombs, whatever. You get the point by now. But now you have Sustain to make up for the fact that you essentially don't have your wound reroll of 1s to go for the devastating wounds. And on top of that, if you do take place all of this on an objective, now you do. The difference of 6 inches is, I think a lot of people would agree that could be a little bit much, right? 6 inches is usually a sweet spot. But, you know, that's why I complain over here that if you have a unit that no matter what happens, it is going to move 6 inches, you do the leapfrog, one go round, but if it fails its charge, it is ass out in the open. It is ass out, nothing to save it. Because you tried to prime it up and you tried to get ready. And that's unfortunately the thing about melee units, combat, fight phase. You are not owed a charge. You're not owed a charge. So it's better to have sometimes a fallback plan in that case. If it all goes to shit, hopefully you get some fight on death out of all these models. But again, invasion fleet's a bit of a cop out. Let's talk about some of the interesting things and where, oh, you just it's theory. You don't. It's like, but then I'm trying weird shit to see if they have applications. Let's talk about other things like Synaptic Nexus. Take Broodlord Gene Stealers and Synaptic Nexus, and then you throw on Dirt's Heart of Chaos on one of them compared to like the Parasite of Mortrix for some fun shenanigans. Yeah, they already have a 5-up invuln, and they already hit on 2s, but what a lot of the game's data sheets are getting are some ways to -1 to hit. So now you get to undo that with Goaded to Slaughter, or the same reason that you wanted to increase your chances of making the charge. You have Surging Vitality, +1 to advance and charge rolls. Now you can't advance and charge, but your charge is a little bit better, alright? But going back to the Dirge Heart of Cars thing that I was talking about, you put your unit with Dirge Heart of Cars on a Brewlord and group of Gene Stealers. You wound them so that they have to take a Battle Shock test. They take it at -1. They fail it. Not only are they Battle Shocked, but now you have the option to go with Smothering Shadow and inflict more mortal wounds. You still have access to funky things like that. Again, that's one unit. But on the help of something like Irresistible Will, this does something better than what was intended for Warrior Bioform Onslaught, or what I think they were going for there. Remember how I talk about in Warrior Bioform Onslaught that, well, why would I use the rerolls here, this, that, whatever, because the melee warriors already have the rerolls, so if I wanted to put it with Hormagaunts, I'd be kind of just fucking myself over. Where here's the thing with Irresistible Will, where it's within Synapse, so shooting or the fight phase, if you have managed the tactics of moving Hormagaunts or a similar melee unit into a unit that you are facing down with Brewlord Gene Stealers, and it's not on the objective, you still retain a way to get your reroll wound rolls of 1, and it doesn't feel completely lost on the reroll hit rolls of 1, because now you have given that benefit to the thing that's around you going into the same unit as you. Still frees up that, and with Override Instincts, you still have access to a fallback in charge. Right? Right. So that's just, hey, you can do some funky things. With Psychostatic Disruption, you can then take a unit of Brewlord Gene Stealers that's scouted 8, put them at a weird position, and now your opponent cannot come in from reserves within a foot of that bearer. And again, this is going to be beating one specific point into the ground, because I want to circle back to Synapse to talk about the way that it changes numbers and how we look at specifically, or when we look at datasheets, when I try to highlight datasheets, because that's the next portion of that. But for the rest of this, let's quickly go through Assimilation Swarm. You have a character, you have access to something like Fights First, or making them stronger, putting them on additional strength. So now you have them hitting on, excuse me, not hitting on, but hitting with Strength 6 weapons with Parasitic Biomorphology. Just say it. And, or something with Regenerating Monstrosity where you're bringing back 2 Gene Stealers a turn. So this is the aspect of, you can still send them up and out. And now you have a brick that is really fucking annoying for your opponent. Now mind you, you have to find a way to do it. But you have a brick that's annoying for your opponent. Maybe a brick that is annoying for your opponent. Heroic Intervention for free if there's a Harvester around. Fights First, of course, still with the Harvester around. I should add that that is the caveat if you want to go that route. But you then soup them up, and yeah, it's like, well, I could have used Warriors for that strength to toughness break point. Or now you could have a bunch more models that will have devastating wounds. Meanwhile, the sustained, you still might end up wounding on fives, or there's a chance that you're still trying to do it on sixes and nothing happens. Right? So, things like that. And then finally, even something that I tried to highlight as far as Unending Swarm, where because of the position you're in, a detachment rule that does not benefit your gene stealers at all. At all. Right? Because they're not endless multitude. You have enhancements on the skew list, because skew is going to skew, that how about plus 2 inches to the move? That's a guaranteed 2. Make your charge a little bit better. How about, well, you don't need the critical wounds, but how about pilings or consolidate an additional 3 so you can slingshot and wrap around and get into even better positions? So you'll be surprised, again, datasheets kind of carry. Datasheets do quite a bit more work than people might give it credit for. Now, really quickly, want to talk about, again, Synapse and something like this, because this was another one where as well, you don't get it. Synapse isn't supposed to make us do anything. It's supposed to do point breaks. And unfortunately, I know somebody that meant well might feel like this comment is lumping them into that. So I apologize for this. But again, this is another comment that going towards, uh, well, you just don't understand why would Synapse do something? Well, because historically it gave you more benefits than what it currently does for us now. You look at ninth, you looked at eighth, and guess what? It functioned differently. It didn't just, and it also wasn't a band aid, right? We do have to remember that they gave the +1 strength in melee a bit later. So let's talk about the point breaks. If, and game design as a whole, if your game design includes a faction needing to take a unit to capitalize on the mechanics of their entire army, it should be less tailor made. If you go, well, yeah, but thanks to the Neurolictor and +1 strength and melee within Synapse, now something that, let's go back to Brewlord Gene Stealers, right? Now something that is buffed up to strength 5 can wound up to T10 on 5s, up to, so I guess up to and including T9, on 5s, and then with the Neurolictor, you take that down to 4s. That's true and that's lovely, but the game design shouldn't include, hey, we had to make people buy this $40, $45 model to play the rest of their army semi-effectively. But let's also bar that, because this comment comes from what I what I gathered, um, in reference to the Lictor. So true. A Lictor with fights first and with stealth and within Synapse then goes to strength 8, AP 2, damage 2. But you have to remember all of the components and that you're playing a dice game. So yes, now you can hit and wound typical Marines on 2s. Alright? They're T4, so now you are within Synapse wounding them on 2s, hitting them on 2s because that's your weapon skill, right? But here's the thing. You still have 6 attacks. It's AP2, damage 2. You take a unit that's 3 wound models, and so what? Or, here's the other thing, because what I understand the argument to be is that your opponent has to invest more to get rid of something. That's very generous in the context that you still can get shot. Your opponent still has access to every other thing that they might want to do. A Lictor has Lone Up, but within 12 inches, the same unit that you say is going to charge it, and it has fights first, so don't worry about it, might have a gun or two. It might have a way of lifting some wounds before it really has to tussle with the Lictor, if not completely getting rid of it because of its 4-up save and 6 wounds. You take a squad that wanted to get into position anyway, maybe move on to the point, or get around where the lictor was, assuming that this isn't your lictor that you rapid ingressed on the board edge. And yeah, it can be annoying for some people, but again, not to drag other people's uh, opinions down with mine, but that's why, again, some people that have really toted the lictor are talking about how it just can't do it that much anymore because the game is just letting you lift shit. Game's a little bit more killy. So you have one model that you spent 60 points on to score 4 points on a 3 points, probably, on a board edge, if that. And you're going, well, yeah, I scored some points. And now, if they try to charge me, they will possibly lose a portion of their unit, which can be true. Not saying that is not possible and won't be the case sometimes. But at the same time, your opponent still wants to play the game. So, you have a lictor that is getting souped up by a neurolictor, right? And your opponent is battle shocked. So now, let's just, for the hell of it, say that it was a unit that would have had -1 to wound if the strength is greater than the toughness, right? So no matter what, you're getting your wounds on 2s through. What happens when you roll 2 1s? What happens if you roll a 1 on the hit, 2 on the wound? You have AP2, they still have access to stratagems. What happens if they pop Armor of Contempt and are still saving on a 4? And they make their 4-ups. Kind of nothing happened. You still, at the end of the day, this is the other thing about, you have to look at the entire data sheet. You have 6 attacks on the fucking lictor. And this is going to be to another one that was a little bit more extraneous that I couldn't believe was kind of there. But you take into account some of the monsters, right? You say, well, now you have the fact that your exocrine, where the fuck are you? Your exocrine or your Tyrannifex is hitting breakpoints. I mean, that's true. Don't get me wrong, that's true. They have reached a new breakpoint going from strength 7 to strength 8 on their melee weapon, right? Or strength 8 to strength 9. You can push that. But they also have 3 attacks at AP 0 hitting on 3s. 4 attacks hitting on 3s, AP 0. So, like, yeah, it's nice that they've reached the breakpoint. And if they do manage to get the wound through, there is a chance your opponent fails the AP 0 attack and loses a model or 2. That is true. But you can't stop at just, oh, we reached the breakpoint, which is again the fact of, yeah, the melee thing doesn't do a lot for us. Because our best melee unit goes on dev wounds, and the rest of our codex doesn't really do it as far as melee goes, whether it be lack of AP, lack of capabilities to get into melee, lack of damage on that melee. You have to consider more than just the one singular thing in the vacuum because, for lack of better words, and this is, again, me being me, maybe because you disagree with something I said along the way, please consider the entire argument before you give an argument. Because that's just, you have to consider all the factors. Again, if your opponent knows that they're going into a fights firsting lictor with AP2, I doubt your opponent doesn't have a plan for that. Yes, they might have invested something a little bit heavier, but now they might be in a spot that they want it to be anyway. Did your lictor give them a way to consolidate onto the point? Did your lictor's positioning, did it matter because you gave up points for purge? Did it matter? Did your opponent still score points off of your lictor's position and getting lifted? Did any of it matter? Did your opponent just shoot it? Because you can still do that part. And then you play the trade game, hopefully. But you've lost 1 unit for 60 points. Hopefully you scored points on the way down. And hopefully you did damage on the way down. But at the end of the day, it is still a melee only unit. So, when I talk about some things, I welcome criticism, and again, that's why I like. Well, I don't know if I'll do the shout out twice because I'm pretty sure I've ruffled some feathers by now. But that's why when you have further opinions on the topic I'm discussing, please do. But to then act like data sheets don't matter is absurd. It's absurd. It is completely absurd. And you have to remember that this is a game that involves data sheets and their interactions as well as what they do on the board. And for that, I will say, I'm not one of the channels that will tell you about how to do things on the board because I'm not a coach. I never try to pass myself off as a pro player. I'm not going to be responsible for you giving me money to try to learn how to win versus all of your friends. That's why I always give the caveat. This is the funny thing you could do. Or at least I try to. There has been a video too where I definitely forget. But at the same time, I realize not all the jokes are self-evident when there's certain comments. Um, so to that, and that actually speaks to quite a few people lately. So you feel like you were caught in the crossfire of that one. Well, I understand that American jokes don't land. Uh, maybe Midwestern jokes don't land for everybody. But you know what's to say you can't just go, oh well, this guy's just talking about data sheets. He doesn't understand. No, it's because of trying new things that you're allowed to have different perspectives and understand what truly makes it tick. Vanguard Onslaught, it needs other units to really support it and hopefully get a buff. Because I implore you to play it without Brewlord Gene Stealers and replace that with maybe Von Ryan Sleepers, Raveners, and Melee Wars and see how much of a difference it makes for you. Even if you go with the jail style route and go with Gargoyles, see how much you miss the fucking Gene Stealers because of what they provide to Vanguard Onslaught. And on to that note, something that we see in a lot of detachments. Sometimes the detachment really is asking for a data sheet more so than the data sheet is asking for a detachment. Right? You take an Exocrine. Is Warrior Bioform Onslaught going to benefit it that much? Eh, probably not. Right? It has access to now shooting targets that might be ignored cover because of ranged warriors. It has access to now strength 11 shooting or reroll wound rolls of 1. Right? All things that could happen. But it's a monster. It has range. If anything, it would benefit more from what we see in Crusher Stampede, where it can still have access to ignore cover. Or once again, the cop out of Invasion Fleet, where it can get resistances and damage. So because Warrior Bioform Onslaught is asking for a heavy hitter to make use of some of the things, doesn't necessarily mean that it means the other way around. And even something with Vanguard Onslaught that I try to talk about is that other things have Vanguard Invader as the keyword. We saw some of the lists are just getting to around the idea of gargoyles. If you want to lock people out, probably need more gargoyles. They also have deep strike. That's a great unit to uppy downy. And to that point, when I go to taking your list and trying it in other places, if your list consists of Brewlord Gene Stealers, Von Ryan Sleepers, and Raveners, right? At the end of the day, your Raveners can uppy downy regardless. Do you need to spend a command point to make 2 more units uppy downy with them? Probably not. Probably don't. If we're being honest, you take any of these units into something like Assimilation Swarm, and now you have access to lethal hits, which can completely bypass that whole situation of you needing to proc surprise assault for possibly +1 to wound if you get lucky enough, right? And again, that's if you get lucky enough. So this isn't to say, oh, never play Vanguard Onslaught. This isn't to say that, oh, you should just always give up and go to Invasion Fleet. But it's to say, data sheets do more than people give them credit for. Just because it has the word Vanguard Invader here doesn't mean that it only needs to be played in Vanguard Onslaught. Just because it's infantry doesn't mean that it will only benefit in assimilation swarm, so on and so forth. You go to Unending Swarm, and again, these enhancements can't go on, well, they can go on a Neurotyrant and then attach to the Neurogon Sprint Endless Multitude unit, but they say Tyranids model only. Get funky with some things. Think about some things. And see if they work anywhere else and why they work. Why they're because of that. And let's keep in mind rebuttals. Oh, well, that's just because you're not doing it wrong. See, that's the other thing that, not necessarily a criticism directed just towards me, but one overall. Into which it's bad game design to say, oh, the reason this doesn't work is because you don't have this, this, and this. Right? Now, it's different if you're saying that, oh, your list doesn't work because you have no infiltrators or scouts, and you're playing Tyranids without a synapse unit at all. Right? That's different. But if it comes down to, oh, that's simple. You just need to play Hive Tyrant, Neurolictor, Biovores, 2 Exocrines, double Maleceptors, triple Tyrannifex, and then fill in the points with what you want, then you get it. No, that's not how that goes. That's not good game design, nor a good reason to do kind of anything. So on that note too, I could give the advice that, hey, if you want to win games, take something along the lines of double Neurolictor, get some Raveners in there. I could go up here and be like, you just go to Invasion Fleet, double Lictor, Tyrannifexes, and that's not just for those, but like if we know what the lists are for Invasion Fleet, we know what they do, right? I guess I didn't even realize that we're over here too. I could tell you, the reason that you're having a tough time is where's your third Exocrine? Where's your second Exocrine? Where's your Maleceptors? I could do that. Don't want to do that. On my channel, I want to talk about the interesting things and how much we value some of the things. You have to understand some things are good because of what they offer, and some things are good because we kind of make them good. Right? This is an okay detachment. This is a great detachment now. People would say this is bad, and once again, you'll be surprised by the things you can do in here. So, I say all this to say, to wrap up this more passionate one, that datasheets matter, and the entire datasheets matter as much as anything else. I could tell you, hey, you need to put 1 Lictor in reserve. 1 Lictor needs to infiltrate to block out potential infiltrating scouts. Then you're going to take gargoyles, string them along here, and you're going to play in a castle formation here and here. We can all do that all day. But I do want to be the person that, even if it takes some additional heat and people telling me, oh, I don't know what I'm talking about. I get a lot of those comments on, especially when they find a 3 or 4 month old video where the rules got updated. That's always funny. But it's like, we can try new things. And even if I'm being critical of a thing that I like, or one that I truly dislike, right? Like, we know that I truly dislike it. One day you'll eventually try the thing that I've tried, and then you'll see what I'm talking about. Or maybe not. Maybe you never see what I'm talking about. Maybe we go our separate ways. But there's no reason to be an asshole about it in my comment section. So, if you like the video, like it. Got a comment from me, comment. And until next time, peace out, my monstrosities.